Greetings everyone. This is a quick promo before the video begins. If you're new to the channel and you didn't know it yet, I am actually an author in addition to being a YouTuber, and I have 2 books that you can get on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1 and The Occult Mafia. The first is sort of a bizarre, absurdist kaiju anime mashup, and the other is a horror noir story with a hint of a western thrown in there. They're both set in the same universe, and at this point have received mostly positive reviews, so you might want to check them out. I've provided Amazon links for both of them down in the description. They're both available in either paperback or Amazon Kindle, and Operation Red Dragon is also available in audiobook form. So if either of these strike your fancy and you want to support a struggling artist, feel free to go down and check out either one or both of them. Alright, the shameless self-promotion is out of the way, we can get on with the video. Thank you all for your support. I wasn't going to come back to this. I'd said my piece and I had intended to just be done. But it occurs to me that maybe there is more to say after all. For those of you who somehow missed it, recently a Netflix film entitled Cuties was released, and it's caused a lot of stir, largely because of its content and how it presents its content. The controversy is mostly from how the film, for all intents and purposes, is putting real 11-year-old girls in sexual situations, which is all kinds of wrong. But, okay, the film got initial negative reactions even before it was released, because that's how people were looking at it. They looked at it and thought, this looks like it's aimed at a very particular group of people who I hope are in jail, or at least are not within 100 feet of a school. And Netflix immediately went, oh sorry, bad advertising, we swear the film's not like that. Then the film actually came out, and everyone who saw it went, oh, they were right, it's not like that. It's much, much worse. Wow, how in the heck did this ever get approved? And it sparked a lot of people to cancel their Netflix subscriptions, and Netflix stocks have plummeted, so they're definitely hurting from it, but they're still sticking by it, as are the filmmakers. And I made my video, I cast my piece, I threw my hat into the ring, as it were, very clearly taking the side that was against the existence of Cuties. And if you're expecting a retraction of any of that, not happening. I really do think that if Cuties becomes accepted, that is just one more part of the slippery slope that is bringing us towards normalizing pedophilia, and I cannot stand that. I did wind up losing a couple of followers myself as a result, though not nearly as many as Netflix lost. And some of the responses from the people who left were kind of ridiculous. If I may share them with you here just for a moment. Names have been erased, so I'm not publicly shaming anyone. This fellow, for example, took umbrage with the fact that I started the video by stating I'm a Christian, and he hated me for it and called me a hypocrite because if I really cared about children being hurt, which I do, I would have started with the Catholic Church and its sex scandal cover-up. First of all, I'm not Catholic, but second, and more importantly, back when I was in 8th grade, my school had this contest of sorts where the graduating class would write an essay on a current events topic, and you would submit it, you'd get some sort of accolade if it won, you know how it goes. But we were supposed to research a current events thing entirely on its own. When I was in 8th grade, that's when the whole Catholic abuse scandal had been revealed and was making international headlines, and I was just as upset by it then as I am by this now. And that's what I chose to do my paper on. It was not easy to write, certainly, not easy to research, but that's what I did. It didn't win, but it placed in the top 3. So, what do you know? I did start with the Catholic abuse scandal after all. And then there was this guy on Twitter who said that I made the video to distract from other political scandals that were happening at the same time, and that I placed all of my blame on the left. Actually, I don't know why I'm hiding his identity. I'll tell you who he is. He's the Tasmanian Devil, as I'm sure you could have guessed from the impressive spinning on display. It's kind of funny, really. I don't remember actually saying that I blamed the left for this. I said I thought it was ridiculous that saying that you're against the sexualization of children suddenly gets you labeled alt-right, but that's not the same as saying it's the left's fault. Unless this guy is saying that the policies that are being implemented to try and normalize pedophilia and the mindset behind that whole movement is on the left, which it is, but it's on the very, very extreme left. But at the same time, I don't think that's what he meant to say. And to be clear, when I do get political, which rarely happens, I tend to be more centrist than anything else. I believe there are two parties for a reason. Each side is supposed to bring something to the table and work together to figure out the best solution for everyone. They're not supposed to be divided and butting heads all the time. But that's a whole different topic. Anyway, now that we've gotten that out of my system, I'd like to once again go back to this subject because what I really want to respond to aren't the people who took extreme umbrage with me, but rather the people who took a more reserved approach when asking for clarification. Because I do think some interesting questions were raised and some interesting subjects were brought up that require expanding, because it's unfortunate the conversation had to happen this way, but I do think there is a conversation to be had. And from this point on, I have got to be very careful with how I phrase things because I do not want to make the mistake of not being clear with anything I'm about to say. Alright, so one particular question that I remember being raised was that there are books by people like Stephen King and George R.R. Martin that also involve characters who are minors in sexual situations. Stephen King wrote It, which has a particular scene. If you've read it, you know the one. And as for George R.R. Martin, in A Song of Ice and Fire, or is it A Song of Fire and Ice? In the source material for Game of Thrones, he sticks to the standards of the medieval times that inspire the setting, in which girls would generally be at least married, and quite possibly married and pregnant in their early teens. That was the standard of the time. But that's a standard that we no longer practice. We have come far, far away from that. And even Stephen King, from what I've heard, kind of regrets making the characters so young and then including that particular moment in It. But the fact still remains, regardless of any of that, those two works have not been even remotely as lambasted as Cuties has. It is considered a horror classic. Game of Thrones, there's been vitriol against it recently, but not from that stuff. It's more in how the TV series botched its ending. But that is an interesting question. How come it's okay when these books do it and no one gets upset over that, but people are getting upset over this? And there is an answer. Actually, there's a multi-layered answer, which I guess you could say means there are answers. I'm rambling now. I should just get to the point, shouldn't I? Part of the difference is because It and the Fire and Ice books are books. You see, one of the reasons why Cuties is drawing so much ire isn't just because there are children in sexual situations. It's because there are real children in sexual situations. They didn't do the typical Hollywood thing of casting older actors to play younger roles, which I guess you couldn't really do with children anyway. It's more commonly done with teenage characters where they cast like 20-somethings. But they have actual 11-year-old girls being sexualized in the film. That is part of the problem here. But in a book, like It or Martin's works, there are no real people involved, except for the authors, who are adults, and they're just putting words on a page. There aren't even really pictures in most of these, as far as I know. And I certainly hope they wouldn't be pictures of that. But let's just assume for a moment it's all prose. There's a huge difference between video of real people and words on a page. Now, does that make these scenes in the books okay? No. Not automatically, no. You're still talking about characters who are meant to be underaged, but I'm just specifying that part of the difference is no real underage people are involved in the books. And when they get adapted into live action works, such as movies or TV series, as those works have been, either the more explicit scenes are cut, like is the case with It, or there's a certain level of simulation at play, where they either don't show the actual act, or the way the act is framed, it's all trick photography in a way. They're using the tricks of the trade, the editing and sound effects and whatnot, to create the idea that this sort of thing is happening when it's actually not. It was all fake. It was all a simulation. With Cuties, there's no simulation. It's real 11-year-old girls being put in these situations where they're being sexualized, being put in clothes that sexualize them and made up to look sexual, and filmed in sexualized ways. That's all real, as opposed to being simulated. Speaking of the cinematography, that's another thing we need to take into account. Presentation. Presentation often makes all the difference in the world. And a lot of people, even those who claim that they get what Cuties was going for, a lot of those same people still say the presentation was really, really bad, to the point where whatever point it thought it was making was completely lost. Presentation is paramount. It is one of the most important things you can do if you're trying to make a point in your fiction. Because if you mess up the presentation, your point will be lost. And there are ways you can present things like what you see in Cuties without glorifying it the way Cuties does. Here's an example, though it might be a slightly controversial one. Sleepers, the novel by Lorenzo Carcaterra, which was adapted into a feature-length film. Now, I say it's controversial because Lorenzo Carcaterra has always sworn up and down that Sleepers is autobiographical, that this is based on real events from his life. Names were changed to protect the innocent, but otherwise it is a true story. However, everyone who has ever done the digging and looked into it can't find a shred of evidence to support that claim. So there's a huge shadow of doubt looming over the authenticity of Sleepers. And as someone who has both read the book and watched the movie, I did it for a high school class, I'm skeptical too. The way it plays out just feels too thematically structured to have been real life. It doesn't mean that there aren't maybe some true elements in there, but I think the story itself, I'm going to need to see some really, really convincing evidence to sway me to thinking it is real. But the authenticity isn't really what we're talking about. What we're talking about is presentation, and I think Sleepers is a good way to provide a counterexample to Cuties because it's kind of similar in what it's talking about. Sleepers, for those who don't know, here's the brief summary. First third of the book is about a group of 4 boys, of whom Lorenzo Carcaterra claims to be one, who are living in Hell's Kitchen. And they are completely unsupervised. So they basically do whatever the heck they want, including all of those things that their parents would have balked at. They're swiping beer and stealing things from gas stations and grocery stores and peeping on women while they're changing. And one of them has a girlfriend that, given how young they are, they're doing stuff that maybe they shouldn't be doing, but they have no supervision. Who's going to stop them? Middle third of the book, they pull a prank that turns out to hurt someone. They get caught, they get tried and convicted and sent to a juvenile detention center, which is run by the worst kind of people imaginable. The warden and the guards and the people in charge basically are child predators, and they have figured out that a juvenile detention center is the perfect place for them to hide and satisfy themselves, if you will, because they don't have supervision there. So now the boys are on the receiving end of the stuff that they were doing out in Hell's Kitchen, and yeah, it's nasty stuff. Final third of the book, it's a time skip. We now see the kids, all of whom made it out alive, but certainly not unscathed. They're adults now, and through a bizarre set of circumstances, again, just a little too clean to feel real, they managed to get their revenge by using the legal system that those guys were hiding in and exposing them for what they are. Not necessarily in the most scrupulous way, but they still managed to do it. Whether it's true or not, it's very well written. And it also manages to deal with this idea of putting young characters, underage characters, in these situations without glorifying it. The movie cuts a lot out. There's a lot of panning away, a lot of glossing over things, a lot of stuff that just isn't in the movie at all that was in the book. So it's slightly more sanitized. Again, that's falling into the whole, it's simulated, it's not real, they didn't really do any of this sort of thing. But as for the book doesn't get graphic in terms of describing what's happening, like the actual acts that are being done, but it does get graphic in terms of sensation, in terms of what the characters are feeling, both physically, psychologically, and emotionally, in terms of the aftermath, in terms of seeing what's going on, how it's affecting them. That's where it becomes very difficult to read. And there is no possible way that you can read Sleepers and come away from it thinking that it glorified what these guards were doing to these kids. At least I hope not. So, yes, there is a way. Cuties did not do it. Pretty much everyone who's seen Cuties at this point has said that it's filmed like a music video. It's filmed like it's glorifying the very thing that the filmmakers claim to be condemning. And to be clear, the filmmakers have said that they are condemning the sexualization of children. The director, I believe, also claims that this is semi-autobiographical. I don't know how true it is, but that's what she's saying. And she said that she's making this as a cautionary tale, a way to sort of warn people about what's going on with their children. And I want to believe that this really was the intent behind it, but that doesn't change the fact that it was still presented in a way that kind of felt like it was glorifying it. Like it was actually sort of maybe proud of the way it was doing things. And it is possible that this is simply the result of losing perspective, basically. Losing perspective can happen. There is, in fact, a very infamous case in the land of filmmaking where loss of perspective actually resulted in a film never getting released. Have you ever heard of The Day the Clown Cried? If you have, you probably just heard me say that title and went, oh yeah, that. But on the off chance you don't know what that is, I'll tell you. The Day the Clown Cried is a Jerry Lewis film. You know, Jerry Lewis, the comic actor from the good old days, used to be teamed with Dean Martin, and then he went solo, made The Nutty Professor and things like that. The plot of The Day the Clown Cried is about a circus clown living in Germany during World War II. And he winds up in a concentration camp where the Nazis running it figure out that his popularity with children makes him the perfect way to lure Jewish children into the gas chambers, because he's making them laugh and putting them at ease as they walk to their doom. And the film ends with him being so racked with guilt over this that he finally just decides one day he'll go in with them and perish with them. Now, it's based on a book that is 100% dramatic, I believe. And Jerry Lewis altered it a little because he directed it as well as starred in it. He altered it to better suit his comic abilities. However, the general consensus among everyone he showed it to was, Jerry, you can't release this. It will kill your career. We know you, we know your heart was in the right place, but this film comes across as the most bad taste piece of cinema ever committed to film. You cannot release this. Whatever point you wanted to make is completely lost. Don't do it. Save yourself from the horror of what will come. And Jerry actually listened. As far as we know, all negatives of the film have been destroyed. The only known surviving copy that's not a bootleg, if there are any bootlegs, is a mostly complete copy that was donated by Lewis to the Library of Congress, but only under the stipulation that they not screen it in any way until 2024. Just a few years away from this video's posting. So yeah, there is precedent for this sort of thing happening. Only in that case, Jerry Lewis had the common sense to realize he couldn't release the film. And yes, a part of me is curious to know if it lives up to its reputation. But a part of me also wonders if I really want to know if it does. Either way though, Jerry Lewis knew that the film could not be released. He lost perspective while making it, but he regained that perspective and realized what had to be done. The filmmakers of Cuties, if they're being truthful about their motivations, they lost their perspective and they didn't regain it. They are continuing to dig in their heels, and they're not even, as far as I know, they're not even considering the possibility that they might have botched it. Which most people agree they did. Now, one individual that I had a little back and forth with, not a hostile back and forth, it was civil, just so we're clear, but he actually said that he wasn't going to watch Cuties, certainly, but he wasn't necessarily going to call it child exploitation either, or child pornography certainly, unless the 11-year-old girls were actually shown in sexual acts, like actually having sex in the film. Unless that happened, that's where he drew the line. And I don't necessarily think I agree with him. See, the issue here is about the sexualization and exploitation of children. And you don't necessarily need to depict the act of sex for something to be sexualized. I can give you examples. Here's a good example. I'm not even going to bother with the character's name, but Megan Fox in the Transformers movies she's in. Now, say what you want about Megan Fox as a performer, but I think we can at least all agree that she has a certain attractive quality to her physically, right? Well, in the Transformers movies she's in, she is never depicted without her clothes on. In fact, I'm pretty sure she's very strict about having no nudity clauses in every contract she signs. She's never depicted engaging in sexual acts, but she's always wearing clothes designed by the costume department to show off those aspects of her that would draw your eye. And she's always framed in such a way to make her look as good as possible. She's not doing anything explicitly sexual, but she is clearly being sexualized in those movies. There's just no denying that, I think. We all recognize it. It's one of the main critiques of those movies. I mean, heck, if that's not enough to convince you, if you think it's just a camera choice, a cinematography choice that is, the whole reason her character is even in these movies is to be the reward for the male character for being heroic. That literally makes her an object to be won. Combine that with the way she's shot and the way she's dressed, she's being sexualized, even if she's not doing anything explicitly sexual. Again, sexualizing is all in the presentation. You can be fully dressed and sexualized, or you can be completely naked and not sexualized. Heck, I'll come right out and say it, I actually don't think that nudity is in itself sexual. Yes, there's such a thing as sexual nudity, but there's also such a thing as artistic nudity, like the statues and paintings you see in museums. Or there's such a thing as comedic nudity. Or there's such a thing as casual nudity. There's an entire lifestyle about practicing non-sexual social nudity. And quite frankly, it sounds like a pretty good way to live, too. Anyway, that's beside the point. The point is, the presentation is how you determine if something is sexualized. And sexualizing children, it's wrong no matter how you look at it. You look at it from a legal standpoint, it's a crime. You look at it from a moral standpoint, it's damaging. You look at it from a biological standpoint, children are not ready biologically for that sort of thing. So it's damaging to them physically if it's inflicted on them. I guess the main point I'm trying to make here is that there is a certain degree of nuance. I don't remember which one said it, but there was a Supreme Court justice who, in a case regarding pornography and smut and whatnot, he was quoted as saying, "I may not be able to define pornography, but I know it when I see it." And I think that actually speaks a lot to how it is all about the presentation. You know when it's sexualized, you know when it's exploitative, when you see it, because of how it's presented. So people are looking at Cuties and they're seeing exploitation. And there are so many of them seeing it that if I were involved in the making of this film, I would at least be stepping back and going, did I really mess up that badly? At this point, I think the best possible move for the filmmakers would be to own up to it. To say, all right, we get it, we messed up. Whether or not they actually mean it sincerely, so long as they say it, they'd at least be on slightly better ground than they currently are. The way things are currently going, they're basically committing career suicide. That would be my advice at least, but I can't control anything that they do. And speaking of having no control, what about the question of the whole cancel Netflix, ban Cuties sort of thing? That's something I kind of addressed in the first video, but I do feel needs clarification. Because I'm someone who has regularly spoken out in favor of artistic expression and against the idea of censorship and cancel culture. So what makes this different? I mean, I didn't actually say anywhere in the video that I think that Cuties or Netflix should be canceled. The cancel Netflix hashtag in the description is purely so the video would get traffic. But at the same time, what makes this different? Am I just rationalizing, or am I secretly into cancel culture after all? Well, I still believe in artistic expression, but again, like I said, it's got to be within limits. Cinema, from its very inception, has been an illusion. It's all about the simulating of things. It doesn't have to be real so long as you believe it's real. If it actually is real, you're either making a documentary or you're maybe taking things a little too far. There are lines that you just don't cross. And the line that's potentially being crossed by Cuties is one that takes it into the realm of being an actual crime, because sexualizing children is illegal. Like I said, wrong from any perspective you take on it, but it is illegal. The whole reason I'm against cancel culture is because it's the very definition of how you make a mountain out of a molehill. Most of the time when cancel culture calls for somebody's life to be destroyed, it's all because of a joke that was made 10 years ago that everyone forgot, or judging the standards of the past so harshly by the standards of the present that context is completely lost, or believing an outright lie and inflicting as much damage as you possibly can before the truth actually comes out, and by then it's too late to actually fix anything. That's generally what cancel culture does. Sure, every once in a while, you get a Harvey Weinstein or a Bill Cosby or one of those things that actually does turn out to be a very big deal. But that doesn't happen frequently enough that I think it justifies the whole movement coming for every single perceived slight. Moreover, cancel culture tends to be reactionary. It doesn't really care about getting all of the facts first, hence why you can actually lie about someone and get them canceled. It's more concerned with just getting justice before anyone can figure out whether or not justice even needs to be served, because you demand action now. But I do think you need to have a level head about this sort of thing. Part of the reason I'm making this follow-up is because I was pretty harsh in that first video. I was not the most level-headed. And I wanted to approach this subject and the other subjects that have come up with it a bit more calmly. Things that involve harming children tend to get my hackles up, but that doesn't excuse the fact that I probably could have been a bit calmer initially. So I'm being calmer now. So yeah, the reason I'm generally against cancel culture is because it's reactionary and it's reacting to things that really don't deserve that level of retribution. But Cuties is potentially illegal. It seems weird to me that a lot of the people who would generally cancel you for a tweet you made 20 years ago aren't coming for this. Because this would be like the biggest fish of them all. There's actual video evidence. It's a backwards time. Look, I don't have the authority to demand that Cuties be stricken from history, and I don't know that it's my place to decide that it should be. That would be a decision for the courts. And apparently there are investigations being called for, so maybe it will become a matter for the courts. Let's assume for the moment that it does happen. What then? Well, there are two possible outcomes. The courts will either look at the film, determine that it does fit the definition of exploiting children under the letter of the law, and that will be the answer. The movie likely will get banned in that scenario. If, on the other hand, it's determined to not be exploiting children under the letter of the law, then the best possible thing to do with the film is to bury it. Not to cancel it, but just to leave it in the past. Forget it. Stop talking about it. Let it fall into obscurity. That way the film hasn't been censored, but we're also not giving it more attention and potentially doing more harm in the process. That's about all I can really say at this point, and hopefully I said it clearly enough that I can't be misinterpreted. What Cuties does disgusts me, regardless of what the filmmakers thought they were doing. To quote V for Vendetta, I'm not here for what they intended to do, I'm here for what they did. Most of us are. Look, despite what that earlier tweet accused me of, I'm not making this a political issue. I don't think it should be a political issue. This is not about who I support for the presidency or who I support in a social movement or something. This is about something that we have known from the beginning of time practically is wrong. That's not about politics. And if you're making it about politics, stop. Just stop. You're not helping. But that's all I can say. I hope I said everything succinctly. And I also hope to never have to deal with this subject again. About the only thing that would bring me back to this subject would be if Cuties gets nominated for an Oscar. Which may not happen, but it did win an award at Sundance. So I can't rule it out. I hope it doesn't happen, but I can't rule it out. And that's just about the last thing I have to say on it, otherwise. Well, can't think of any other way to end this, so till next time.
If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Like and subscribe, then go down to the description to find links to follow us on DeviantArt, Patreon, and Twitter. While you're there, you'll also find the Amazon links for the original novels Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, and The Occult Mafia. 2 books I think you'll really enjoy. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.